evening. I'm Teresa Skubik, and this is Forum Daily for Wednesday, February 19th. Investigators going over the wreckage of a Delta flight that crash-landed at Toronto Pearson's International Airport on Monday say that the plane's cockpit and flight data records have been sent to lab for study. A senior investigator with the Transportation Safety Board of Canada says it's far too early to say what caused the flight from Minneapolis to land hard, catch fire, and lose a wing and flip on its back on a runway amid gusty winds and blowing snow. All 80 people on board survived, though 21 were injured. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says the federal government is moving ahead with a high-speed rail network between Quebec City and Toronto. The Liberal government says that the planned rail network will span approximately 1,000 kilometers and reach speeds of up to 300 kilometers an hour.
The largest infrastructure project in Canadian history. A high-speed rail network between Quebec City and Toronto with stops in Trois-Rivières, Laval, Montreal, Ottawa, and Peterborough. It'll span 1,000 kilometers with 100% electric trains that will reach speeds of 300 kilometers an hour. A reliable, efficient, high-speed rail network will be a game changer for Canadians, slashing travel times by half, getting you from Toronto to Montreal in 3 hours. It'll stimulate our economy, strengthen the bonds between cities and our two most populous provinces, and reduce costs for businesses while improving their productivity and competitiveness.
Industry Minister Anita Anand explained exactly how the partnership for the rail project named Alto will work.
So just to build on a couple of these questions, the structure of the relationship between Alto and Cadence is a public-private partnership. And the expertise and experience that Cadence brings to the table will ensure reliability. And we will be very prudent with taxpayer dollars in this co-development phase to ensure not only that reliability accrues at the end of that 5-year process, but also that the risk of non-success is completely minimized. And in fact, Cadence as a bidder was chosen because of its ability to minimize that risk. And we looked very carefully at the question of reliability, given we need this project to succeed, and it will succeed. Thank you.
Yesterday on the campaign trail, former House Leader Karina Gold made an ambitious pledge focused on entrepreneurship in Canada and making it easier for entrepreneurs to excel in the country.
My announcement today is that as future Prime Minister, as leader of the Liberal Party, I want to create 1 million new entrepreneurs in Canada. And so I'm here to announce 3 things today. First, my plan to unlock growth, ownership, and innovation. Second, to increase access to capital, and third, to support high growth sectors. And so the way that I plan to do this is first by thinking boldly and differently about how we support businesses. I want to ensure that we have support for business acquisition. So I plan to create a national program to provide training, mentorship, and advisory services for entrepreneurs looking to acquire existing businesses. Second, we need to simplify business transfer regulations. We need it to make it easier for entrepreneurs to buy and sell their businesses while ensuring that diversity in the market. And third, I want to create an immigration stream that is dedicated for entrepreneurial talent. So if you're a newcomer to Canada or you want to immigrate to Canada and you are committed to acquiring and scaling a business in Canada, we should fast track your application.
Ms. Gold also explained how Canada needs to think differently about employment insurance and the importance of using AI to increase productivity.
I want to increase access to capital. What does this look like? It means expanding government-backed loan guarantees of up to $500,000 to $1 million per entrepreneur through the Business Development Bank of Canada and chartered banks. I want us to think differently about employment insurance and create an entrepreneurship lump sum program, similar to what Germany has, so that for eligible EI recipients, if they want to acquire or grow a business, we can support them to do that. I also think that we need a startup and innovation fund to help entrepreneurs launch businesses in high growth sectors like AI, green technology, and biotech. And I think we need to enhance the entrepreneurship incentive. So we need to encourage innovative entrepreneurs in research and startups to scale up their businesses, especially in the technology and manufacturing sectors, through targeted tax changes. And finally, my third pillar for supporting high growth sectors. You know, here in Edmonton, I know there's a big focus on AI and biotech, and so I want to ensure that we are supporting entrepreneurs across the country integrate AI into their businesses. We are at a pivotal point, I think, in our economy and when it comes to AI, that we can either choose to have AI to use to harness our productivity and our economic potential, or we will fall behind when it comes to the global economy. And I think in Canada, we can choose to harness AI and to use it and develop it responsibly to really increase our economic output and productivity in Canada.
Liberal leadership candidate Mark Carney leads in fundraising, but Chrystia Freeland's team says that her numbers are stronger than the data. Elections Canada data lists Ms. Freeland with just over $226,000 raised, but a Freeland spokesperson says she actually received about $600,000 in campaign contributions, but the Liberal Party hasn't yet forwarded all of it. Ms. Freeland's campaign says that it chose to have the party collect donations to avoid credit card and wire transfer fees. Democracy Watch, a nonprofit organization that advocates government accountability, held a news conference in Ottawa to discuss its efforts in holding the Prime Minister and his cabinet to account for their role in the SNC-Lavalin scandal.
I am here today to announce that Democracy Watch is taking the next step in its years-long process to hold the Trudeau government and Prime Minister Trudeau and the Trudeau cabinet accountable for pressuring the Attorney General back in the fall of 2018 to intervene and stop the prosecution of SNC-Lavalin. And Democracy Watch has chased after the RCMP right back since these revelations were made in February 2019, filed access to information requests and pushed on those requests, and has had now more than 3,600 pages of internal investigation documents disclosed by the RCMP. And what those documents show is that the RCMP did a weak, incomplete investigation. They only interviewed 4 of 15 key witnesses, and they trusted the public statements of everyone involved in pressuring the Attorney General, Jody Wilson-Raybould, at the time. And they also changed the standard that they used for determining whether there had been an obstruction of justice, using an incorrect legal standard for making that assessment.
The organization is now filing a private prosecution in the courts in Ontario and argued that the RCMP should not have been the body to investigate the scandal.
Democracy Watch is today filing an application in Ontario Court of Justice for court approval to pursue a private prosecution of these allegations of obstruction of justice and breach of trust. And that's what I'm here today to announce. And Democracy Watch's position has always been during the investigation that the RCMP should not have been investigating this matter, should not be investigating any matter involving federal cabinet ministers, because the RCMP commissioner, the deputy commissioner, and the heads of every division of the RCMP are all chosen by and serve at the pleasure of the Prime Minister and the cabinet. And as a result, they lack independence and are vulnerable to political interference. And what should have happened is that a special prosecutor should have been chosen, not by the ruling party cabinet, not by the RCMP commissioner who serves at the pleasure of that cabinet, but through a fully independent process.
Pat King has been sentenced to 3 months of house arrest for his role in the 2022 Freedom Convoy in Ottawa. A judge found him guilty on 5 counts back in November, including mischief and disobeying a court order. The Crown was seeking a 10-year sentence for Mr. King, while his defense had asked for time served and probation. Mr. King helped organize the demonstration against COVID-19 health measures that gridlocked streets in the capital's downtown core for 3 weeks. All right, don't go anywhere. Coming up after the break, Liberal leadership candidate Mark Carney announces his plan to end the consumer carbon tax. And Conservative MP Michael Barrett calls on Mr. Carney to disclose his conflict of interest and past business dealings. Stay with us. Forum Daily will be right back after these messages. Yesterday on social media, Liberal leadership candidate and frontrunner Mark Carney announced his plan to end the consumer carbon tax, calling it divisive and distracting.
I'm not a career politician. I am a pragmatist. So if I see something that's not working, I'm going to change it. We need to fight climate change, but we need to do it together. There are billions of dollars of investment on the table and millions of jobs at stake. Canadians can't be left behind. But the truth is, the consumer carbon tax isn't working. It's become too distracting and too divisive. That's why I will cancel it and replace it with incentives so we can reward people for making greener choices, like buying a more efficient appliance, driving an electric car, or insulating your home. The fact is, big polluters are profiting from their actions and Canadians are paying the price. We'll get big polluters to pay us Canadians to lower our carbon footprint. Pierre Poilievre, he's been lying to you, making us feel like we have to choose between fighting climate change and growing our economy. I know how we can fight climate change and build the strongest economy in the G7.
And while Mr. Carney is currently considered to be leading the pack in the Liberal leadership race, the Conservatives are calling on the former central banker to disclose his conflicts of interest and past business dealings.
Carbon tax Carney must come clean with Canadians about potential conflicts of interest and all of his business dealings. We're in a very interesting and troubling place for Canadians, with Carbon tax Carney having been a senior advisor appointed by Justin Trudeau to advise him, but done in such a way to shield him from all of the standard and customary accountability. Justin Trudeau gave Mark Carney all of the power and none of the accountability that comes with it. You look at some of the positions that we know Carbon tax Carney held at the same time, some of the decisions the Trudeau Liberals took. For example, the Trudeau Liberals changed mortgage rules in such a way to that would benefit the bottom lines, pad the pockets of mortgage companies, private mortgage insurers, like the one owned by the company Mr. Carney represents at the same time he was sitting in the Prime Minister's office. While Mr. Carney was chairman of the board at Stripe, Stripe was shielded from the government while they were gouging Canadians. This is the same problem we have with Brookfield trying to enter into a pension scheme with the Canadian government worth $10 billion to Canadians, while Mark Carney was sitting in the Prime Minister's office.
MP Michael Barrett accused Mr. Carney of claiming that he would comply with ethics rules if he wins the Liberal leadership race. Mr. Barrett was asked by a reporter what the Conservatives would do to change ethics rules in response to their claims.
Mark Carney that needs to change, or is it the rules? And if so, if it's the rules that need to change here, what would a Conservative government do to change these ethics rules?
Well, first of all, we're in a position where Justin Trudeau and the NDP Liberals have shut down Parliament. So we have no opportunity to use any of the accountability tools that are usually available to us, including committee. We have no ability to change the rules or change the laws because they've locked parliamentarians out of the House of Commons, and so we're left to deal with these rules. But they're insufficient because Mark Carney has been given the privileged role of serving as a senior advisor to the Prime Minister while they avoided the normal disclosure process. So we arrive at this place only because Justin Trudeau shielded Mark Carney from the usual accountability practice. To be clear, the rules weren't designed for a situation like this and would need to be updated to reflect the reality that we find ourselves in. I don't believe that the architects of these rules could have imagined the lengths that Liberals would go to break the law as it had been and avoid the law as it had been created. And of course, Conservatives will have a common sense solution to ensure that, that in the future we don't find ourselves in that position. But today, Mark Carney needs to make that public disclosure. And he can't wait until after the Liberal leadership. He can't wait until after the next election. He needs to do it now. He skated for far too long by avoiding the spirit of the law as it had been written.
Late last week, a federal court heard arguments over Justin Trudeau's decision to prorogue Parliament. The lawyers involved launched their case to argue that there should be a limit on when Parliament can be prorogued. Megan Gilmore, reporter with Canadian Affairs, has more on the case.
So this case is specifically about the current proroguement. So lawyers for two, representing like two individuals who put forward this complaint are saying that the current proroguement of Parliament is unlawful, particularly given our situation with the US. So this challenge was begun after Donald Trump started making threats about tariffs. So that's one of the reasons. And then another reason that they drew upon a lot before the federal court was the reasons that Justin Trudeau gave on January 6th in his press conference. So his reasons about Parliament being at a standstill, that nothing can really happen, and that he's proroguing Parliament so that there can be a Liberal leadership race. Now, lawyers for the government are going to quibble about whether or not those were the actual reasons for proroguement, but it is specifically this proroguement that they are questioning whether or not it is lawful. And in terms of the law, they would rely on the section of the charter that talks about your right to vote. And they would say that currently their clients are not being represented by any member of Parliament because Parliament is not in session. The judge decided to hear the case and decided to hear it quicker and an expedited manner. So the reasons for hearing the case faster than normal are a couple. One is we have a timeline, right? Like proroguement is only lasting until March 23rd, I believe. The Liberals will vote for their new leader on March 9th. So if the court had done the regular timeline for hearing this case, proroguement would have been over. It would have been a moot point. So that's one of the reasons to expedite it. The other one is about what's happening in the US and the economic threat that tariffs could pose to Canada if they are imposed. So it's a combination of just our timeline with proroguement and then also what's going on in the US. So the argument against the courts weighing in is essentially that this is outside of their jurisdiction, that decisions to prorogue are political in nature. They are rooted in unwritten constitutional principles. There is no strict matter of law for the court to weigh in on. The concern that was raised by lawyers for the government and then also an intervener siding with them is that if the court weighed in on this decision, the court would be becoming inherently political and that would undermine or could undermine, the trust that Canadians feel in their judicial systems, in their courts. That's really the big argument. There's also an argument that would say that the Prime Minister does not make the decision to prorogue. The Governor General makes the decision to prorogue on the advice of the Prime Minister. Lawyers will go back and forth about that because in practicality, the Governor General follows the prime minister's advice to prorogue. So while I was saying earlier that the lawyers for the plaintiffs were pointing out that, well, for the applicants, sorry, were pointing out that Justin Trudeau's decisions that he gave on January 6th in his press conference were not lawful reasons to prorogue Parliament. Lawyers for the government would say that might have been what he said in a press conference to all of Canada, and that his wording might have been, I'm proroguing Parliament so that we can have a leadership race, but the actual technical decision to prorogue is made by the Attorney General. I mean, sorry, not by the Attorney General, by the Governor General, Mary Simon, when she agrees to prorogue Parliament.
This morning, Chief of Defense Staff General Jenny Carignan briefed the press in Ottawa on changes to the Canadian Armed Forces recruitment process.
Our focus is transformation and mobilization are the two key words that I use to describe the approach that we have at the moment. Right now, we are focused on restoring our regular force to our authorized strength of 71,500 and our reserve force to 30,000 members. But we are also planning for the future, and under Reconstitution 2.0, we are setting conditions to grow beyond that number to be ready for whatever the future holds.
All right, stay tuned. Up next, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh announces his plans to prioritize an east-west clean energy corridor, while also stating that he isn't fully opposed to pipelines. And Nova Scotia tables their budget for the year with major tax cuts and a significant amount of funds kept in reserve amid Trump's tariff threats. Stay with us. We'll be right back after these messages. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says that an east-west clean electricity corridor would be his first priority for expanding the Canadian energy market. And Mr. Singh isn't shutting the door entirely to pipelines.
Well, we absolutely need to build infrastructure east-west. And what I'm proposing is an east-west energy grid. We've got incredible supplies of low-cost, cheap electricity that's clean electricity, but we're not connected between the provinces. Imagine the climate we could create, the business climate, the manufacturing climate we could create across the country if we connected the cheap, low-cost, cheap, clean electricity from jurisdictions like Manitoba, like BC and Quebec, and connected that across the country. Imagine the amount of jobs we could create. We built an east-west energy grid that connected our country. That's a project that would put steel workers to work, electricians to work, a host of jobs, and it would build up a more resilient country. We've heard, and I went to Germany, spoke with the German government. They want our energy. They want clean energy. So let's build clean energy in our country. That's a massive infrastructure project. That's lots of steel. That's lots of jobs. And that stays in our country. That builds up our country. No, that's just my priority. My priority is we need a big, massive public infrastructure project. And I like to see an east-west energy grid. But when it comes to public projects around energy, we have a couple of criteria that we look at. These are important criteria. We want to make sure, one, it's something that the community wants in their community, so social acceptability. We want to make sure that it's a project that actually benefits workers. So we want to see a clear plan that creates jobs in communities that benefits Canadian workers. We want to make sure that we meet our environmental requirements, so we're not damaging or hurting the environment. And finally, we want to make sure we work with Indigenous communities to make these projects happen. But yeah, we're open to projects if they meet those criteria. The project that I'm really focused on and excited about is an east-west energy grid, but we're open to other projects as well.
Most Canadian energy exports currently go to the U.S., which is threatening Canada tariffs on all exports, including on energy products like oil. According to records discovered by the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, Global Affairs Canada spent more than $527,000 on artwork in the last 2 years. The Toronto Sun's Brian Passafoom joined us for more on the spending spree.
Yeah, the records that were unearthed showed that over the past 2 years, well, 2023 and 2024, Global Affairs Canada spent over $527,000 on 158 pieces of art. They're all listed. They don't exactly say where the art is located, like it's an itemized list of everything that was purchased. It just says it's going to be for display in Canada's embassies, high commissions, consulates, and official residences. The prices paid, they vary quite wildly. They on the low end was $175 for pencil drawings from an Inuit carver, Alosak Sharkey, to most was $24,000, just under $25,000 for a tapestry made by a Calgary-based textile artist. Now, what's unusual about that one was that was purchased on March 31st, 2023. And it seems like the bulk of these art pieces were purchased as kind of, like March Madness bonanza stuff. The government's fiscal year ends in March. So it seemed like that they were sort of burning through their budget for the end of the fiscal year. Now, this is on top of there was a story I did last year, where over the past little bit, government agencies have spent millions and millions of dollars renting art from the Canada Council of the Arts. That's a crown corporation. They're based in Ottawa, and they run a federal art bank, which is a repository of more than 17,000 pieces of artwork by Canadian artists. And that's available for government bureaucrats, politicians, organizations to rent. So if you ever go into like a bureaucrat or a politician's office and you see like a beautiful Canadian piece of art there, very good chance it's rented, and that the government is sort of paying itself to rent art. So these prices are on top of that. So it was kind of a question about if Canada already has an art bank, if Canada already has a way for Canadian politicians and embassies and consulates to display Canadian art, why is Global Affairs Canada spending over $500,000 over the past 2 years to purchase art on top of that? It was kind of interesting to see the sort of the variety of art, not just the prices, but also the types of art too. Like for example, Global Affairs Canada spent $990 each for 3 stoneware and African glass pieces by a Quebec artist, $20,000 for a piece of fabric art by an Ontario artist, and kind of the one that really kind of turned a lot of heads was there was about $9,000 paid for a piece of art made out of Lego blocks. Now, this isn't just like a Lego figurine or something. It's an actual hanging art piece made out of Lego blocks. Which I guess is kind of an interesting medium, I suppose. But it all adds into the sort of the questions about, does Global Affairs have that money to spend on art? Why are they, if there's already art available to rent, why are they spending $500,000 to purchase art? I think those are the questions that a lot of people, including the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, are asking right now, particularly in a time right now where things are, there's an affordability crisis going on. There's a lot of scrutiny about government spending, especially what's going on south of the border. So yeah, there's a lot of questions here to be answered.
Nova Scotia has tabled a $17.6 billion budget with major tax cuts and significant money kept in reserve for an uncertain future. Finance Minister John Lohr says the government is forecasting a nearly $698 million deficit for the 2025 to 2026 fiscal year. He says that's in response to Donald Trump's tariff threat. The province is looking to diversify its economy in areas such as critical minerals. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation, Devin Drover, praised the budget.
The Nova Scotia provincial budget has been delivered, and it's great news for taxpayers. Included in the budget is tax cuts that will save the average individual in Nova Scotia over $1,000 this year. This includes cutting the HST by 1%, finally ending bracket creep, and increasing the basic personal income exemption amount. However, it is not perfect. There are concerns with the provincial deficit, which has increased from last year, which means more money wasted on big government interest payments. However, overall, a good start. Nova Scotians desperately needed tax relief.
BC's throne speech used wartime imagery to portray the province in a historic battle against U.S. tariffs. BC's lieutenant governor said a tariff war with the U.S. would be devastating to both sides of the border, but the province must fight back if needed.
We open this first session of British Columbia's 43rd Parliament at the most consequential time for our province since the Second World War. In the face of an unprecedented and unjustified threat to our economy, British Columbians are joining with all Canadians to fight back. We've come together to support each other and stand up for our country. We are saying with one united voice, we will never be the 51st state, not now or ever. Instead, we will take our destiny into our own hands by building on our strengths. During its first 4 weeks, the new United States presidential administration has taken our country on a roller coaster ride. And we must be prepared for this to continue for the next 4 years. The historic bond between Canada and the United States has been strained in profound ways. Trust has been broken and will not easily be repaired. No matter what the future has in store, one thing has been made clear. We will not leave our future success to the whims of unpredictable forces from beyond our borders, or leave people here to fend for themselves. We are at a crossroads. The journey ahead will not be easy, but there is nowhere better positioned to weather the storm and come out the other side stronger than right here in British Columbia.
After the throne speech, BC Premier David Eby was questioned about the lack of detail in the throne speech in terms of the government's agenda moving forward.
The throne speech did not have a whole lot of details about what your agenda is putting forward here. At what point did you make changes here to focus in essence entirely on patriotism and remove some of those crucial details that people are looking for?
Well, the speech outlines the threat that's facing not just British Columbia and not just Canada, but many countries around the world, which is U.S. tariff policy right now. It's essential for us to reorient government to that threat. We were and have been preparing for lower interest rates, easing pressure on British Columbians, assisting businesses in reinvesting, expansion of our economy, continuing that work. Clearly, this is a different environment. We're now facing a scenario where there are tariffs threatened that will put Canada's and British Columbia's economy on the back foot. And we need to make sure that we're meeting the moment. British Columbians expect that with a credible plan to respond if ultimately tariffs are put on us proportionately and firmly to defend British Columbia and defend Canada, to grow our economy by expediting major projects, and by bringing legislation forward to enable us to do those things, as well as to diversify our trading markets both across Canada and around the world. This is going to be the issue of the session. It is the issue of primary concern for so many British Columbian and Canadian families, and it is our concern too, and it is our focus.
Coming up next, Ontario's Liberal leader appeals to NDP voters in the province. Stay with us. We'll be right back after these messages. Ontario's Liberal leader, Bonnie Crombie, appears to have shifted her campaign approach with a specific focus on NDP voters in the province.
It's not too late. This election is no way over yet. There are 10 more days, and we're going to make the most of each and one of them as we see the race narrowing between the Premier and myself. And that's why I'm reaching out today to NDP voters, and I'm asking them, if you want to change our healthcare system, please vote for Ontario's Liberals. And together, we can change the government. There's a lot of work to do, but only Ontario's Liberals are committed to getting you a family doctor within the first 4 years of our mandate, reducing those wait times in hospitals. We have the momentum, we have the wind at our sails, but we can't make that change without your support. So once again, I'm asking everyone to come together. And when we come together, we are strong and we can fight and we can change the government and send Doug Ford packing.
And while on the campaign trail this morning, Bonnie Crombie made a series of announcements on taxes, including reducing provincial income taxes and cutting small business taxes.
Not only are we going to cut small business taxes, so business like this one that Samir owns are going to benefit from lower small business taxes. We're going to cut them in half, as a matter of fact, from 3.2 to 1.6%. And that should put about $18,000 back in the pockets of small businesses to help them retain staff and maybe even hire a few more or do what they can to promote their businesses. So important. For everyone else, we're going to cut your income taxes. Yeah, everyone on the first $75,000 that you earn, you're going to pay less, from 9% down to 7%. And it's going to, between that and our other promises, we're going to put money back in your pocket. We're also going to take the HST off home heating and your hydro, and combined, that will put $1,150 back in your pocket. Now look, I know everybody was happy to get their money back, their taxpayers' money, and get a $200 check, and you were able to top up your groceries or pay your rent a little more at ease last month or this month, I guess. But we're going to put $1,150 back in your pocket every year, and you can count on that. So my pitch is, if you want to ensure that you have a family doctor, let's hold Doug Ford accountable. The only way to do that is to change the government. And the only way to change the government is to vote Ontario Liberal.
The White House says billionaire Elon Musk is not technically part of the team sweeping through U.S. federal agencies. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt instead calls Mr. Musk a senior advisor to U.S. President Donald Trump.
First of all, President Trump is the ultimate decision maker for this entire administration. Elon Musk, just like everybody else across the federal government, works at the direction of President Trump. Elon Musk is a special government employee, as I have told you before. He serves as a senior advisor to the president, if you will, within the executive office of the president. DOGE has people that, again, are onboarding as political appointees at every respective agency, and they are working alongside our agency partners and the secretaries that President Trump nominated and have been confirmed by the United States Senate to identify waste, fraud, and abuse at these agencies, and that's his role.
She adds that the group isn't ordering thousands of job cuts, but instead the cuts are being ordered by the government departments themselves. Defining Mr. Musk as an advisor could help the Trump administration as it pushes back against a lawsuit arguing that Mr. Musk has too much power for someone neither elected nor Senate confirmed. The Trump administration's special envoy for Ukraine and Russia has arrived in Kyiv for talks with President Vladimir Zelensky and military commanders. The Trump administration's special envoy for Ukraine and Russia has arrived in Kyiv for talks with President Vladimir Zelensky and military commanders. General Keith Kellogg's trip comes a day after U.S. President Donald Trump suggested that Ukraine was to blame for Russia's invasion, set to enter its fourth year this weekend. Mr. Trump told reporters in Florida that Ukraine's leaders should have never started the war and should have made concessions before Russia sent troops in.
But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal. I could have made a deal for Ukraine that would have given them almost all of the land, everything, almost all of the land, and no people would have been killed, and no city would have been demolished, and not one dome would have been knocked down. But they chose not to do it that way.
Talks between top U.S. and Russian diplomats in Saudi Arabia yesterday sidelined Ukraine and its European supporters. And Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky says he wants Mr. Trump's team to be more truthful. He says that U.S. President Donald Trump is living in a Russian-made disinformation space as a result of his administration's discussions with Kremlin officials about the end of the war.
Sorry, if we talk about 4%, we understand that this information is coming from Russia. We understand that, and we have total evidence for that all those numbers were discussed between America and Russia. Unfortunately, President Trump, with all due respect, he is the leader of American people whom we respect a lot. Unfortunately, he lives in this disinformation space. It's not a matter of how many percent of Ukrainians support me. The most important is the number one question: how stop the war?
Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly says Canada continues to ask the U.S. to include Ukraine. The Vatican says that Pope Francis slept peacefully in a breakfast after developing pneumonia in both his lungs. An early update on Wednesday came from the Vatican spokesman. Late on Tuesday, the Vatican said that Francis's respiratory infection also involves asthmatic bronchitis, which requires the use of cortisone antibiotic treatment. The Vatican said, quote, laboratory tests, chest x-ray, and the Holy Father's clinical condition continue to present a complex picture. The spokesman said in a late update on the Pope that he's in good spirits and is grateful for the prayers for his recovery. Rapper A$AP Rocky was found not guilty on Tuesday of firing a handgun at a former friend in Hollywood over 3 years ago, avoiding what could have been a years-long prison term. A jury in Los Angeles deliberated for only about 3 hours before clearing the musician of 2 felony counts of assault with a semi-automatic firearm. The 36-year-old hip-hop star, fashion mogul, and actor, whose legal name is Rakim Mayers, would have faced up to 24 years in prison if convicted. A$AP Rocky did not testify in the trial. After the verdict was announced, the rapper dove over a courtroom divider to hug his supporters and longtime partner, Rihanna.
County of Los Angeles, people of the state of California versus Rakim Mayers, case number BA 508142-01. We, the jury in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Rakim Mayers, not guilty of the
The general manager of the American team at the Four Nations Face-Off hockey tournament says he would welcome a visit from President Donald Trump for the championship game between the U.S. and Canada tomorrow night in Boston.
We would love it if President Trump was in attendance. We have a room full of proud American players and coaches and staff. And listen, we're just trying to represent our country the best way we can.
I was not in the arena. I want you to go ahead and describe it based on what your experience was. The boos were so loud you couldn't hear the anthem. So was there bad blood prior? Was it the booing of the anthem? Or do you think it has something to do with the politics of the day between our two countries?
I think a little bit of everything. I mean, Canada-U.S. is a huge rivalry in hockey. I think there was a little bit of a political flair to it. It's just the time that we're in. And then, I think our guys use that as inspiration.
NHL veteran Bill Guerin says Trump's presence would give a boost to the rivalry between the North American hockey powers. He credited Mr. Trump's tariff threats and talk of making Canada the 51st U.S. state for ratcheting up the intensity in their fight-filled matchup in the preliminary round. And Skate Canada announced an elite class of 2025 to its Hall of Fame on Tuesday, led by 2-time Olympic ice dance champions Tessa Virtue and Scott Moyer and 3-time men's world champion Patrick Chan. Caitlin Osmond, a women's world champion in 2018, and 2-time pairs world champions Megan Duhamel and Eric Radford were also among the inductees. Virtue from London, Ontario, and Moyer from Ilderton, Ontario, won ice dance gold at the 2010 Vancouver Olympics and the 2018 Pyeongchang Games. They also combined for 8 Canadian titles and 7 world championship medals. Chan from Ottawa was the men's world champion for 3 consecutive years from 2011 to 2013. He also won silver in 2009 and 2010. The 10-time Canadian champion took silver in the men's event at the 2014 Sochi Games. I'm Teresa Skubik, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. For more news on demand, you can always visit our website at forumdailynews.ca and make sure to follow us on social media. You can also watch all of our commentary programming on the News Forum YouTube channel. Good night, Canada.